This is the first in a series of presentations designed to help the user understand the basics about using Noetix Webquery to retrieve Betsy data for the purposes of creating or modifying financial reports. The first step towards using Webquery tool is simply to open an Internet Explorer browser and type in the address that you see above, right into the address line. Once you do that, you should be taken to a page like the one that you see here, where you'll be prompted to enter your username and password. This will be the same username and password that you currently use to log into Oracle E-Business Suite. After you enter the username and password, just click on Login and you should see a list of the responsibilities that you have for Noetix Webquery. If you don't see any responsibilities here, that means you need to fill out an Oracle responsibility request form and send it to ITSS Help Desk. Currently, we recommend that everybody uses the EMR Noetix Global login for reasons that I'll explain shortly. After selecting EMR Noetix Global, simply click Continue, and you'll be taken to the first screen, the same screen that you'll always see when you log in using a web browser to Noetix Webquery. In a later lesson, we'll talk about how you can actually log into Noetix Webquery using Microsoft Excel. But for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to learn a little bit about navigating through this tool in the web browser. We're also going to take a look at creating a financial report based on some already customized reports that Webquery has created for us. And then we're going to save that report to our personal folder, and we're actually going to extract it to Excel. But first, let's take a moment to familiarize ourselves with the layout of Noetix Webquery. As I mentioned before, this is the first page and the same page that you're always going to see when you first log into Webquery. What you'll find here is a list of folders that are separated by operating units that you can go into that contain published reports for those operating units. Keep in mind that you can use any of the reports within any of these folders if you use the Noetix Global login that I mentioned before. That's the reason why we suggest that people use that login, so we can utilize each other's reports and even help make standard reports. Probably the most important of these folders for the user that's coming in here trying to generate their own report is the one called Noetix Global on Betsy Noetix Global. This might be one of the only folders that you use in Webquery. Let's take a look at why. When I click on that folder, it's going to take you to some subfolders that are found underneath it. If you don't see the area that you're interested in working in, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. You just have to contact ITSS Help Desk and ask them for access to that folder. So let's take a look at an example here. What if I'm interested in creating a financial report out of the general ledger in order to see the balances for a specific account in a specific period? Which one of these folders do you think would be the most appropriate for me to go looking in? That's right, the General Ledger Answers folder. Selecting that folder, you'll see that I'm taken to another host of more specific folders that I can utilize to try to get to the specific area within the GL that I'm hoping to utilize. I just want to take another moment here to show you something of the navigation of this tool. If you're ever getting lost within these folders and subfolders, a good thing to remember is that you can always track back just by clicking on these hyperlinks up on this header navigation bar. So for example, if I wanted to go back to the public folders, all I would need to do would be to click on public. It would take me right back to the first folder that we came to when we logged in. And here you can see is the Noetix Global on Betsy Noetix Global folder again. So let's go back to our example. So again, I came into that folder, clicked on Noetix for Oracle Financials, and then clicked on General Ledger Answers. Underneath there, I see all of the public folders that are available for me to use in General Ledger Answers. Sometimes when I show people this in a class, I can tell that they're a little bit dismayed to see all of these folders and subfolders, and it can kind of come across as a little confusing. But one thing I want to remind you is that most of us work in very specific areas. And so once you know the area that you need to go to get your reports, like for example, if you're an accountant, most likely you're going to be coming to the same path each time to create your reports. So don't feel like you need to know every little nook and cranny of this tool in order to understand how to use it. All you need to know how to do is to find those specific areas that are important to you so that you can get the information that you need from these reports. So that you understand the basic concepts surrounding the navigation of this tool, let's take it one step further and actually go into creating or modifying a financial report. You've got two choices when it comes to creating reports within Webquery. The first one is that you can go into the subject area folders and you can select the appropriate view and you can modify that directly in the way that you need. The next is you can actually look at some of the pre-made Noetix Webquery views that they've created for you in the hopes that they could guess, point you in the right direction towards the type of report that you were hoping to create. So take for example, what if I wanted to know what the balances for each period for a given year and the accounting flex field information were? I could create that by selecting this pre-made report, and you'll notice that it comes up with a submenu on the side, or I could go into the folders above and try to create it from scratch. Either way is just as good. So looking at it this way, let's take this approach. I'm going to click on this pre-made Noetix Webquery report, and I'm going to select New Custom Query. You'll see some of the other options that I have available here that we'll go into in later exercises. When I click New Custom Query, it's going to take me into the customization of this report. Next exercise, we're going to go into more detail about all of the various customizations that you can apply to a report. But for this one, let's just learn how we can execute a custom-made report as it is. So in order to do so, all you have to do, and you can do this at any time, is just click the Execute button up above on your masthead. You can also find that down here on the bottom right in your navigation. So I'm going to click Execute, and you'll see that I'm presented with all of the prompts that Noetix Webquery has already provided for this report. Next time, as I mentioned, we're going to go into how we can create these prompts and modify them ourselves, because these are not always, of course, going to be the ones that you want. So let's go ahead and attempt to run this report. I'm going to run it for the current year, which is 2013, for US dollars. And let's say I want to specify the set of books just to keep the output specific. And maybe I know what the cost center is. And just to keep it simple, I'll run it for a specific business unit or natural account. And here we have some of the parameters entered. Now, one thing to point out here is that if you don't enter a parameter, you can default it to the % sign, and that will return anything. So it's a wild card. Another important point to make is that you can make a parameter optional so that you don't have to enter anything simply by clicking the optional button underneath it. So if I click this optional radio button, it's not a required parameter, it's just optional. So now let's go ahead and execute it and see what we get. Just click Execute. It shows us the parameters again, so I could enter them here. You can see the ones I already put in place just for the purposes of the example. I could change them here if I wanted to. And then underneath here, click Continue Executing. By default, the output appears, as you see here, in a web format. But that's not very useful for data manipulation, so you have an option where you can view the data in Excel, or you can even query it in Excel. Next time, we're going to go through in detail on how you'll query this in Excel. But right now, let's choose this option. So here's the detail in an Excel format, but it's still embedded in a web browser. So what you'll want to do if you want to actually extract this to Excel so that you can manipulate it there is just click on the Excel icon, and it's going to export all the detail from the output of your report to an Excel format where you can manipulate it and work with it just as you normally would. Finally, we'll want to save this query so that we can run it next time for the next period or any time that we want to use it going forward. So I'm going to close the Excel spreadsheet and return to the web query. And you can see up here on my masthead, I have the option to save the query. So I'm going to choose Save. And you'll see that the default location is going to be your personal folder. So we'll do a Save As. And the default name for the report is going to be the name that Noetix Webquery gave it, which is a long question. But instead, I think I'm just going to choose something simpler like GL balances. And then maybe for that particular business unit. And maybe US dollars. Click OK. You should get a message that the query has been saved. And to verify that, we can practice our navigation again. Notice how I can pin down my masthead by going to My Web Queries. And if I click on My Web Folders up here, I can go to my personal folder. Now I have a lot of reports that I've written over the years. So when you go into your personal folder for the first time, you're not going to see anything up like this. It's going to be all blank. You can create your own subfolders by clicking here, just like I have. And by default, it's going to all go down here. So you can verify. It'll be even difficult probably to find this because I've got so many in here. But you can see that I've got my GL balances, 3012 US dollars. And I can modify that going forward, or I can execute it. So thank you for joining me for this first session on how to use Noetix Webquery. As I mentioned, next time we're going to go into more of the customizing options. Just to give you a sneak preview, we're going to look at the options that we have available here on how we can make these queries more catered towards our own personal needs for reporting. And we'll go into some other advanced options as well.